Hello again. I am here today, piggybacking off of my last video, if you didn't see it, right here. And I wanted to talk about why some brown Latinos self-identify or put white in their paperwork. And to do that, we gotta rewind, take a bit of a history lesson, so put on your history hats, and let's go. To make it easier to digest, we're gonna really go back and start at the beginning, the founding Americas, all the Americas. And I have my phone right here, with my notes and years and stuff, because I need to make sure that I stay on track and don't go on too many tangents. Okay, so first the Spanish came in like 1492-ish, and then the British came, and they both brought over African Americans for enslavement, chattel slavery, and they also enslaved Native Americans as well. But they both had sort of different thought processes. And the British had the one drop rule where, if you had one drop of black or native blood, you were considered colored. And the Spanish thought that they could just breed the color out. So in turn, the Spaniards were marrying a lot of native women, but both the British and the Spanish forced assimilation on everyone who wasn't already one of them. And in doing so, they made the blacks and natives lose a lot of their indigenous culture, like from wherever they came from. And then fast forward a little bit to 1810, 1821, where Nueva España gains independence from Spain and forms Mexico. Therefore, all the people and all the levels of their caste system were now considered Mexicans. And then after they had gained their independence, they abolished legal slavery. And afterwards, the sort of area of Texas no longer wanted to be a part of Mexico. And they sort of separated themselves and tried to be their own little thing. And the reason for that was because they wanted to keep their freedoms, slaves, but they'll call it cultural differences. Yeah, so that's sort of the real truth of the famous Battle of the Alamo, where we were told growing up in school that they wanted to keep their freedoms. And obviously, Mexico didn't recognize Texas as independent. They weren't legally independent. The United States wanted to annex them because they wanted to continue on with their manifest destiny, and they wanted Texas as a slave state. And it sounded good to Texas because Texas, again, wanted to keep their slaves, and they were going bankrupt. And then even though this land was being stolen from Mexico, they really did not want to go to war. And eventually, in 1848, the illegal, let's put that out there, Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo was signed, and this treaty was to gain peace between the United States and Mexico. It solidified the border between Texas and Mexico from the Rio Grande, giving what is now Texas, New Mexico, Arizona, California, Utah, Nevada, and all this area to the United States. And of course, even though Mexico was now independent, the government was still criollos, white Spaniards born there were criollos, if you didn't know. When the United States paid the money for these lands, it went to the government of Mexico, never the indigenous. It's their land to begin with, but hey, whatever. Now, this treaty was illegal for a few reasons because it was technically signed under duress. The United States had invaded the capital of Mexico and was holding it hostage as these negotiations were going on. And on top of that, they, like they do not honor the treaties. So whenever these former Mexicans who were still on their same lands that they had been living, they were given 1 year to decide if they were going to relinquish their Mexican citizenship and become a United States citizen, rights and all. In 1868, the US ratified the 14th Amendment, and in that it stated that anyone born on these lands would be a US citizen. However, it was interpreted back then that the only persons who could do that were whites and blacks. Those were the only people who could be citizens. That's the way it was interpreted then. Mexicans and Native Americans were not a race back then. And Mexican still isn't. Whatever. You know what I'm saying? And so therefore it didn't extend to them like it should have via this treaty. And then in 1898, there was a Texas court case, the Rodriguez case, where there was a man who did not relinquish his Mexican citizenry, and he was trying to, I believe it was vote. And they were obviously like, no, you can't do that because we have to uphold this Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo. But there were people who did relinquish their Mexican citizenry in favor for the US, and they still weren't being allowed to vote. And because race was viewed at very binary as white and black, they had to put these new Mexicans that were now US citizens into one of these categories to give them these rights. And they didn't want to put them under blacks because then it would increase their numbers. They didn't want that. So, under the paperwork, they would be considered white. But socially, they were treated very much brown, very much non-white, as history does. Then in the 1920s, the citizenship and naturalization of these Mexicans were being debated yet again. And this time there was a dude who was in charge of these naturalizations, whatever he was called. And they were deciding that anyone with Indian blood would no longer be naturalized. That they could no longer be naturalized, they could no longer immigrate into the country, and the only persons who could were the free whites or the African descent. And that decision superseded the Rodriguez case and meant that anyone or any Mexican with any amount of Indian blood could no longer be considered white, therefore naturalized, aka a citizen. Brown Mexican citizenship has always been debated and still debated to this very day.
But do you think Bad Bunny is a good choice for the Super Bowl?
I'm not that knowledgeable about him, but it seems fine, and I don't know why it's a big deal. Seems like a great American artist, so sure.
He's
why
not an American artist, but
he's Puerto Rican. That's part of America, dear.
yeah, you don't think you have any problem with him saying like the ICE is, well, I'm sure you don't, mother effers and sons of and that he's not going to perform here due to immigration?
America agrees with him on that.
You think so?
Majority of Americans think ICE has gone too far. They've watched videos of 79-year-old business owners be slammed to the ground and their ribs broken by ICE. So I think the American people are probably on board with that message at this point, Tommy.
They've always known that brown Mexicans are Native Americans. They have always known this. Anyways, not only were they able to detribalize so many of us, they made new labels for us and even got us to relabel ourselves into these things, such as Hispanic or Latino. And honestly, even now, most people don't even use these terms correctly. They don't even know what the fuck it means. Hispanic comes from the Roman word Hispania, which was used for Spain. Now it's Hispanic is used in the US to mean anyone of Spanish speaking origin or descent. So Hispanic could be someone from Mexico, it could be someone from the Dominican Republic, it could be someone from Spain because they are Spanish speakers. It's about language. The term Latino is shortening for Latin America, obviously, and it is used for anyone coming from Latin American countries. We know what those are, not Spain. Now that we know what those are, someone could be Hispanic, someone could be Latino, someone could be both. For example, if you're from Spain, you are Hispanic, but not Latino, because that's not in Latin America. If you are from Mexico, you are Hispanic as well as Latino because you speak Spanish and you're from a Latin American country. Say if you're from like Brazil and you speak Portuguese, that's not Spanish, so you would not be Hispanic, you would only be Latino. So Latino is geography, Hispanic is language. Okay? Okay. Being labeled white as your race was only for naturalization. It was only to gain rights, but it was never meant to be that Latinos or Mexicans were white. They were never treated white. Even now, we will never be white. It was never about being above Black people or tribalized Native Americans. Like, it wasn't to make us higher in the caste system. It was purely for naturalization, and they still be going back and forth on that. And then now, when we actually do have more race categories, such as Native American or Pacific Islander or Alaskan Native or what have you is on there. I don't exactly always remember. But because we are detribalized and they worked so hard at that, now they have given the Native Americans less numbers. But we are still Native Americans. But we no longer identify with that. We no longer claim it. And 1924 is when actual tribal Native Americans were even able to have citizenship, which is fucking crazy. Like, they've been on these lands, they're from these lands, but couldn't be naturalized because of white supremacy. Go figure. Imagine. And that's the problem. They want all of the natives, they want all of us gone. And the brown folks like Nino are further adding to the erasure of our people. Especially because they never understand the whys and hows. It's getting really dark. Need to hurry up. A lot of people no longer understand the whys and hows and no longer identify with that. And that's exactly what they want. They want us all gone. Because if we're all gone, they have nobody left that's going to try to reclaim these lands that they stole or bought, whatever. People like Nino from our last video and other folks like him, what they don't get is you can self-identify or claim white all you want, but we will never be white. They will never see us as white. Because as long as we are brown Latinos or come from brown families, they will always know that we are not white. We are native to this land, and they don't want us here. Even if you are completely detribalized, like most Mexicans are, they don't know what specific tribe we come from or they come from. I have been doing research into my own family lineage for years, and I still don't exactly have a tribe like figured out. Anyways, even if you're completely detribalized, they don't want you here, and that's still proven to this day. I mean, look at all of the actual Americans that they're still trying to deport because they're brown. And we don't see no white illegal immigrants getting detained because they're specifically looking for brown people. They are still trying to get rid of us. And more people need to understand this. Anyways, that's all I wanted to say. I just needed to explain why on God's green earth people like Nino will call themselves white. It's, what can you do? I actually have a quote that is a really good quote for this exact topic, and we'll just end it with that. This is a quote from Vance Black Fox in 2018. I think about what so many generations of Native people on this land, brown people, being forcibly removed from their parents for years, and it makes me angry and it makes me sad. Because I know, we know, that these children being separated from their parents are going to experience that same trauma and the same pain that so many of us have experienced all these generations since the boarding school era. Native people are so angered because we also know that brown people from Mexico and Central America who are coming here out of need and out of survival most of the time are also indigenous people. They may not know exactly their tribe or their affiliation, but they are brown because they come from indigenous heritage. So once again, it's happening.